The evening skies over Lagos carried a strange weight that night. It wasn't the usual kind of dusk, the soft blend of orange and purple that kissed the skyline of Victoria Island when the sun was slipping away. No, this one felt heavy. The air was restless, swollen with the kind of tension that made people glance upward uneasily, as though the heavens were holding their breath. Inside a long convoy of polished black SUVs, the world looked different. Tinted windows cut out the grime of the streets. Cool air conditioning drowned out the cries of hawkers and the horns of Danfo buses choking the main road. And at the center of this procession, seated comfortably in the back of a Mercedes Maybach, was Chief Adewale Okonjo, one of the richest men in Lagos. He was a man of numbers, of concrete and steel, of wealth piled so high it touched everything he desired. His empire stretched from real estate to oil blocks, from government contracts to secret offshore accounts. His name was printed in magazines, his face occasionally plastered on billboards at election time when he sponsored campaigns. But to those who worked under him, or worse, to those who crossed him, Adewale was not a hero. He was a storm, cold, arrogant, calculating. Beside him sat his only son, David, a boy of 9 years, small-framed with wide, curious eyes that rarely blinked. David was different from his father in every possible way. Where Adewale's face was hard with suspicion, David's was soft with wonder. Where Adewale's words were clipped, sharp, and final, David's tumbled out like pebbles rolling downhill. Questions, observations, laughter. And yet, tonight, Adewale barely noticed the child. His eyes were fixed on the glowing screen of his phone, thumb scrolling through stock updates and contract emails. His world was digital numbers, shifting figures that dictated where power flowed. David pressed his small hand against the cold glass of the car window, watching the world outside with fascination. They were stuck in traffic near the bridge, where yellow buses coughed fumes into the air and beggars tapped at car windows with hollow eyes. That was when David saw him. A boy, roughly his own age, but clothed in rags that hung loose like old curtains. His hair was uncombed, his feet bare, his skin marked with dirt. Yet he was not begging like the others. He was crouched near a broken streetlight, holding a stick, drawing carefully in the dust on the roadside as though the whole world was his chalkboard. David leaned closer to the glass, his breath fogging up the window. He could make out shapes, numbers, letters, and then, astonishingly, the outline of a tree with roots and branches, sketched neatly in the dirt. The homeless boy was teaching. 2 younger children stood before him, listening, nodding, repeating after him like pupils before a teacher. "Daddy," David whispered, tugging at his father's sleeve. "Look." Adewale didn't lift his eyes. "What is it?" "That boy, he's teaching them. On the ground. He's like a teacher." His father gave the briefest glance, barely a second, before returning to his phone. "He's a street rat. Don't waste your eyes." But David could not turn away. Something about the boy seemed different. Even from the safety of the SUV, with glass and air conditioning between them, he felt drawn. The boy raised his head for a moment, as though sensing David's gaze, and their eyes met through the traffic. And for a brief, heart-stopping instant, David felt something impossible. The boy's eyes were not empty or broken. They were ancient, wise, like the ocean itself was hiding inside them. A shiver ran down David's spine. The traffic eased. The convoy rolled forward. Soon the boy was behind them, swallowed by the chaos of the street. But David's small chest heaved as though he'd left a piece of himself back there on the roadside. That night, the boy came back to him in his dreams. David saw him standing under a tree, whispering words that he could not hear. Around the boy's feet grew light, soft and glowing, like fireflies dancing in the grass. The boy's lips moved, and though David still couldn't hear the words, he understood something deeper. The boy carried a secret. He woke in the vast emptiness of his father's mansion, the kind of house where marble floors echoed and expensive art lined the walls, but warmth was nowhere to be found. His father was already gone to meetings before dawn, his mother long absent from his life. Only maids moved about silently. But the boy remained on his mind all through the morning. By evening, David could not resist. He slipped away from the compound. It was reckless, the billionaire's son disappearing into the streets of Lagos. But children are often guided by instincts stronger than fear. He found himself wandering toward the bridge, heart thumping. until he saw the same spot near the broken streetlight. And there he was, the boy, still teaching, this time showing a group of street kids how to count using bottle caps. David approached cautiously. The other children noticed first, falling silent. The boy looked up slowly, eyes locking on David. "You came," the boy said, voice steady. David froze. You know me? I saw you." The boy replied simply, as though that explained everything. There was something unsettling about the way he spoke, not shy, not pleading, but calm, almost commanding. David swallowed. "What's your name?" The boy paused, then answered, "Samuel." Why do you teach here?" "On the ground." Samuel's lips curved in a faint smile. "Because knowledge doesn't need a classroom. It only needs a heart willing to listen." David's eyes widened. For a moment, he forgot that this was a boy in rags, homeless and hungry. His words were heavy, older than his years. But before David could ask more, a sharp voice cut through the air. "David!" The sound of his name snapped him around. His father's driver was striding toward him, panic on his face. Behind him, two of the convoy guards rushed forward. "What are you doing here?" The driver's voice trembled. "Your father will kill me if he—" And then the world seemed to shift. The broken streetlight above them flickered to life for the first time in years. A sudden gust of wind swept dust into the air, scattering the bottle caps across the ground. The other children shrieked, backing away. Only Samuel stood unmoving, his gaze fixed on David. "Go back," Samuel said softly, but his voice carried like thunder. "Your father is not ready yet." David shivered. His small hands trembled, but something inside him didn't want to leave. The guards grabbed him, pulling him away. He twisted, shouting, "Wait. I want to stay." But Samuel's eyes burned into his, calm and deep. "You'll return," he said. "And when you do, he will follow." The words echoed long after the traffic swallowed the place again. Inside the Maybach, Adewale was furious. His voice cut like a whip as he scolded the boy, threatening to lock him inside the mansion forever. But what unsettled him most was not his son's disobedience. It was the memory of the streetlight. He had seen it too, flickering alive at the exact moment the ragged boy had spoken. And for the first time in a very long while, Chief Adewale Okonjo felt something crawl along his spine. Something colder than fear, something heavier than anger. It felt like fate. The city pulsed with its usual rhythm, horns blaring from Danfo buses, hawkers weaving between cars shouting, "Gala!" Pure water, and the heavy scent of roasted corn carried by the late afternoon breeze. Inside one of the city's most exclusive neighborhoods, however, the world was different. The streets were quiet, lined with jacaranda trees whose purple blossoms painted the ground. Security guards patrolled gates the size of small buildings, and cameras blinked silently from corners. It was here that Chief Emeka Nwafor, the billionaire magnate, lived. His mansion was a fortress of glass and marble, with lawns so well-trimmed they looked like velvet. On the high steel gate hung the bold insignia of his business empire, Yin Group, gleaming like a golden crown under the Lagos sun. That evening, as the sun dipped low, the gate opened for Chief Emeka's black bulletproof SUV to glide in. The driver, immaculate in white uniform, held the door as the man himself stepped out. Emeka was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a navy blue Italian suit. His wrist gleamed with a gold Rolex, and his eyes carried the cold sharpness of a hawk surveying prey. He was a man who had clawed his way from obscurity in the muddy streets of Onitsha to sit at the table of power, and he carried that hunger like a badge. But this evening was different. As Emeka walked toward the door, he paused. His eyes narrowed at a figure sitting on the pavement just outside his gate. It was a boy, a scrawny, dust-covered boy, no older than 11. His hair was rough, his clothes torn and hanging loosely on his fragile frame. His bare feet were cracked, and in his hands he held a tiny chalkboard, the kind used in rural schools. On it, he was scribbling numbers with chalk, so worn down it was barely more than dust. And sitting in front of him, watching with wide, innocent eyes, was Emeka's only son, Chinedu, 7 years old. The boy's laughter rang out, bright as a bell, as the homeless child pointed at the chalkboard and explained something. "See, if you put 5 here and remove 2, you will have 3 left. Easy, ABI," the homeless boy said, his voice gentle, patient, yet carrying a depth of certainty far beyond his years. Chinedu clapped his hands. Yes, you're teaching better than my school teacher. Emeka's jaw tightened. His blood boiled. The son of a billionaire, his son, sitting cross-legged on the dusty pavement, learning from a beggar? A boy who looked like life itself had rejected him? Emeka stormed forward, his shoes crunching on the gravel. Chinedu, his voice cut like thunder. Get inside this moment. The little boy froze. He looked up, fear flashing in his eyes. The homeless child, however, lifted his gaze slowly to meet the billionaire's. For a heartbeat, Emeka faltered. The boy's eyes were unusual, deep brown, yes, but there was something ancient in them, something steady and unnerving, like he was staring straight into Emeka's soul. I said get inside. Emeka barked again. Chinedu jumped, grabbed his school bag from the ground, and scurried toward the house. But not before glancing back at the homeless boy with regret. The boy remained seated, calm, unmoved. He picked up the chalk again and continued writing quietly on his slate, as though nothing had happened. Emeka's anger twisted into curiosity. He found himself walking toward the gate, his shadow looming over the child. Who are you? He demanded, his voice low, dangerous. The boy looked up again, unblinking. My name is Somadina, he said simply. It means may I not be forsaken. Emeka sneered. And yet here you are, forsaken, teaching outside a man's house like a stray dog. Somadina didn't flinch. Forsaken by men, maybe, but not by God. For the first time in years, Emeka felt his words die in his throat. The boy's voice was soft, but it carried a weight, an echo, as though he wasn't just speaking for himself. Emeka turned sharply on his heels, brushing off the encounter. Security, he barked. Clear this street rat from my gate. 2 guards hurried over, but by the time they reached the pavement, the boy was gone. Only the little chalkboard remained, propped against the gate. On it, in neat handwriting, was a strange message. The one who teaches with nothing holds everything. Inside the mansion, Emeka poured himself a glass of cognac, but his hands trembled slightly. He told himself it was anger. He told himself it was nothing. But the boy's words kept replaying in his mind. And though he did not know it yet, that small encounter at the gate was the crack through which his perfectly controlled world was about to collapse. Later that night, Emeka sat in his study, going over documents. The Empire never slept, neither could he. But outside his tall glass windows, he thought he saw movement by the gate. He squinted. There, under the glow of the streetlight, was the boy again, sitting cross-legged, his slate on his lap, writing with chalk. Emeka blinked. He stood, stepped closer to the glass. But as the headlights of a passing car swept the street, the boy was gone. Only the faint outline of chalk dust on the pavement remained. His heart skipped. He rubbed his eyes, muttered under his breath. Nonsense. I'm working too much. And yet, deep inside, he knew this was no ordinary child. The following morning, Chinedu refused breakfast. He sat sullenly, pushing food around his plate. What's wrong with you? Emeka snapped. I want to see my friend, Chinedu whispered. What friend? The boy at the gate. Emeka slammed his fist on the table. That boy is not your friend. He is nothing. Do you hear me? Nothing. Chinedu's small eyes welled with tears. But he whispered something that struck like lightning. If he is nothing, why does he know things you don't? Emeka's fork froze halfway to his mouth. His hand tightened. That day, for the first time in years, Emeka skipped a business meeting. He ordered his driver to take him on a slow drive around the estate, searching. But Somadina was nowhere to be found. 3 days passed, then a week, then 2. Emeka convinced himself it was over. A fleeting encounter. Just a beggar child who spoke too boldly. But fate was not finished. One humid night, when the cicadas screamed from the jacaranda trees, Emeka was startled awake by Chinedu's voice. He rushed into his son's room. The boy was sitting upright in bed, eyes wide open, but unseeing. His small hands clutched the sheets tightly. Chinedu. Emeka shook him. Wake up. But Chinedu's lips moved on their own. And in a voice not entirely his own, he whispered, The Forsaken One has returned. Do not send him away, or you will be the one forsaken. Emeka's blood turned to ice. Chinedu gasped, blinked, and just like that, he was awake. He stared at his father, confused. Papa? Why are you scared? Emeka swallowed hard. He had no answer. All he knew was this. The boy named Somadina was not ordinary. And somehow, he had already entered their lives, whether Emeka liked it or not. And so began the unraveling of the billionaire's carefully controlled world. Chike never forgot that night. The glow of the city lights, the cruel laughter of strangers, and the heavy silence of the boy's wisdom stayed with him like an unshakable shadow. By the next morning, even as his driver opened the back door of the black Range Rover, even as his personal assistant handed him the day's schedule, the boy's words clung to him. Your son will only learn what you value. It sounded absurd, like something from a self-help book, yet it rang with an authority that unsettled him. Chike had dismissed preachers, consultants, even psychiatrists, but those words, spoken by a barefoot boy who slept on cardboard by a gutter, refused to leave his mind. By mid-morning, he was in the boardroom of his glass tower, his empire's headquarters in Victoria Island. The room smelled of imported leather and old money. A dozen executives sat around a glossy mahogany table. Screens flashed numbers, charts, projections. To them, Chike was unshakable, the cold billionaire who built an empire from nothing, who turned debts into diamonds, who made rivals vanish. But that morning, his mind wasn't in the numbers. His eyes wandered to the window where the city sprawled beneath him. Endless traffic, hawkers weaving between cars, children in faded uniforms trudging to schools that looked like prisons. One boy caught his eye. He couldn't see the boy's face from the 15th floor, but something about his small frame walking alone on the roadside jolted him. For a fleeting second, he imagined it was the same boy from last night. He blinked, shook his head, forced himself back to the presentation. And if we secure this deal, sir, his finance director was saying, we'll corner the market by Q3. Chike nodded automatically. The room watched him, waiting for his verdict. Normally, he relished their fear, the power of his silence. Today, the silence pressed down on him like a weight. Finally, he said, do it. The board exhaled. Pens scratched notes. Deals were sealed. Money would flow. Yet inside Chike, there was no triumph. Only an emptiness gnawed deeper. That evening, when he returned home, his mansion blazed with artificial light. The gates opened to reveal fountains, manicured lawns, and marble pillars imported from Italy. It was the kind of place designed to intimidate. But the grandness no longer comforted him. Inside, his wife, Ifeanyi, descended the staircase, draped in diamonds and silk. She kissed his cheek out of habit, not affection. You're late, she said, her tone flat. Chike muttered something and went to the dining room, where his son, Tobe, sat playing on a tablet, his food untouched. Eat, Chike said sharply. I'm not hungry, Tobe replied without looking up. Chike's eyes narrowed. When I was your age, But he stopped. The boy's face was lit by the glow of the tablet, distant and cold. For the first time, Chike saw not his son, but a mirror, himself at that age, hungry for everything except love. His throat tightened. He swallowed hard and sat down. The silence stretched. Forks clinked. Ifeanyi scrolled on her phone. Tobe tapped his game. And in the middle of that silence, the boy's voice from last night whispered in his memory again. Your son will only learn what you value. Sleep was impossible that night. Chike tossed in silk sheets, haunted by memories. His father's drunken curses. His mother's weary eyes. The hunger that gnawed his stomach until he swore he would never be poor again. And now, here he was, richer than kings, yet unable to speak to his own child without anger. By dawn, he rose, restless. Something pulled him, an invisible thread. He told his driver to take him through the back streets of Lagos, the places he never went anymore. The car wove through slums, markets, and gutters. The billionaire who ruled the city now sat staring at its underbelly. Then he saw him, the boy, curled under a broken kiosk, barefoot, clutching a tattered schoolbook. His eyes opened as if he had been expecting Chike. No surprise, no fear, just that same calm wisdom. Chike stepped out. For a moment, he felt the gaze of the streets, hawkers pausing, beggars staring. What was a billionaire doing here? But Chike ignored them and walked toward the boy. You, he said. His voice came out harsher than intended. What's your name? The boy blinked slowly, then answered, Emeka. Chike studied him. Dirt smudged his face, his shirt was torn, but his eyes glowed with something unsettling. Why were you talking to my son last night? Chike demanded. Emeka tilted his head, thoughtful. Because he asked me questions. What questions? Why rich people look so sad? Chike froze. He hadn't expected that. His jaw clenched. And what did you tell him? That money is a heavy thing. It can crush the heart if you don't carry it right. The words hit Chike like a slap. He wanted to scoff, to dismiss them. But instead, he felt his chest tighten. You're just a boy, he snapped. What do you know about money? Emika's gaze never wavered. More than you think. For the first time in years, Chike felt small. He turned abruptly and walked back to his car. But even as the door shut behind him, even as the engine roared, he knew something had shifted. He could not shake the boy's presence. That night, strange things began to happen. He dreamed of fire, streets burning, people screaming, his empire crumbling into ashes. And in the center of it stood Emika, untouched by the flames, holding Tobe's hand. When Chike reached for his son, the boy pulled Tobe away and whispered, "He belongs to what you choose, not what you own." Chike woke drenched in sweat, his chest pounding. For the first time in decades, he prayed, not to the God he had long abandoned, but to something, anything, that could make sense of this. Days turned into weeks. Chike kept returning to that slum, drawn to Emika like a moth to flame. Each time, he told himself it was curiosity, nothing more. But deep inside, he knew it was more. He needed the boy's presence, the way his words pierced through the noise of power and wealth. Emika never asked him for money, never begged, never complained. Sometimes he was reading a torn Bible, sometimes teaching younger street kids letters from the sand. His calmness disturbed Chike. It was the kind of peace billions couldn't buy. One evening, Chike finally asked, "Where are your parents?" Emika looked up at the darkening sky. "They are where peace is. I am here where purpose is." The answer chilled Chike. It was not the voice of a child. It was something older, wiser, something that felt almost otherworldly. And so the bond began. Chike brought food some days, clothes other days. But Emika never accepted more than he needed. Once, when Chike tried to hand him an envelope thick with cash, the boy simply pushed it back and said, "Your son needs you more than I do." That night, Chike sat alone in his mansion, staring at his sleeping boy, and for the first time, tears slid down his face. But shadows were growing. Not everyone in Chike's world welcomed this change. His wife noticed his absences, his strange mood. His executives whispered about distraction, weakness. Rivals watched for cracks in his armor. And in the spiritual realm, though Chike could not yet see it, dark forces stirred, angered by the boy who carried light into the life of a man bound by greed. The city seemed to whisper with omens. Black birds circled above his mansion. Dreams grew stranger, visions of rivers turning to blood, voices calling his name. Always, Emika was there, standing calm amid the chaos, with Tobe by his side. And so, the stage was set for a collision that would shake everything Chike thought he knew. Because soon, his world of gold and marble would clash headlong with a barefoot boy's wisdom, and the supernatural forces that guarded him. The days that followed were heavy with silence. Chief Adewale sat in his glass-walled office on the top floor of his company's headquarters, staring blankly at the skyline of Lagos. The city below was alive with horns, chatter, and chaos, but inside him, there was only stillness. For years, his wealth had been a fortress. It insulated him from the noise of suffering. It blinded him from the cries of the common man. But now, he couldn't unsee the ragged boy with bare feet teaching his son kindness in the middle of the street. He couldn't unhear the words the boy had spoken that night. What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? That scripture, which he had not heard since his mother's death, burned like hot coal in his chest. He thought about the boy constantly, his piercing eyes, his quiet wisdom, his defiance against despair. The boy lived in rags, yet walked with a dignity Chief himself had lost long ago. One afternoon, unable to take the restlessness any longer, Chief ordered his driver, Musa, to take him back to the same street where it all began. "Sir, are you sure?" Musa asked cautiously. He had worked for Chief for 12 years and knew his boss avoided dirty places like poison. "Just drive," Chief muttered. The SUV rolled past the gleaming towers of Victoria Island, past neon billboards and foreign boutiques, into the narrow, suffocating alleys of the mainland. The air here was thick with roasted corn smoke, engine fumes, and the cries of hawkers chasing customers. And then, there he was, the boy, sitting on a broken pavement with a chalkboard he must have scavenged, surrounded by a cluster of children in tattered uniforms. He was teaching them mathematics, drawing numbers with a stub of chalk. His face was streaked with dust, but his eyes shone like fire. Chief's chest tightened. He leaned forward, staring at the scene as if trying to carve it into his soul. The boy noticed the black SUV. Their eyes locked. For a moment, the world stopped. The boy smiled, calm, fearless. Chief looked away. He could not hold that gaze for long. When he returned home that night, his wife, Funk, noticed the shift. "You've been distracted lately," she said as they sat at the dining table, golden cutlery glinting under chandelier light. "What is it? Work?" "The board." Chief sipped his wine slowly, masking his turmoil. "Nothing. Just thinking." But she knew better. "You went back there, didn't you? To that street boy." Her words were laced with disapproval. "Why must you entertain such things? You're a billionaire, Adewale. You have a reputation to protect. People look up to you." He slammed his glass down. "And what do they see when they look up? A man with cars, houses, companies, but no soul." Funk froze. She had never seen him like this. Meanwhile, his son, Daniel, had not forgotten the boy either. The image of his father's coldness being shattered in front of that homeless child replayed in his mind every night. He asked questions constantly. "Daddy, why don't we invite him home? Daddy, why is he on the streets? Daddy, can't we help?" Chief brushed him off at first, but the persistence wore him down. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony overlooking the city, Daniel whispered, "He taught me more in one day than all my teachers have in a year." Those words pierced Chief's heart deeper than any sword. That night, Chief dreamed. He stood in his mansion, but the walls crumbled into dust. His cars rusted before his eyes. His bank accounts dissolved into smoke. And there, in the ruins, the homeless boy stood barefoot, holding Daniel's hand. A voice thundered, not from the boy, but from the heavens above. "The wealth of a man is measured not by gold, but by what he gives away." Chief woke, drenched in sweat. The echo of the words rattled his bones. The next day, against every instinct of pride, he returned to the boy. This time, he stepped out of the SUV. His polished Italian shoes touched the dusty ground. The crowd of children gasped. Rich men never walked these streets. The boy looked up at him calmly. "You came back." Chief's throat tightened. He struggled to speak, his arrogance wrestling with something deeper. What do you want from life, boy?" The boy smiled faintly. "To give others what was denied me." "And why teach here?" Chief gestured around at the broken shacks and gutters. The boy's reply was simple, yet it crushed Chief's defenses. "Because this is where hope is needed most." The children around nodded, their faces lit by trust in the ragged boy. Chief turned and left abruptly. But his heart was not the same. Days later, during a board meeting, Chief's directors argued over a new investment. Profits, expansion, luxury. Their voices droned on like flies, but in Chief's ears, all he heard was the boy's words, "What does it profit a man?" Suddenly, he slammed his hand on the table. "Enough! I built this empire to fill a void, but it has only made me emptier." His voice shook with rage and pain. "We sit here counting profits while children rot on the streets. I can't do it anymore." The room went cold. His closest advisor leaned forward. "Sir, what are you suggesting?" Chief's jaw tightened. His mind raced. He had reached the breaking point. That night, as a heavy storm lashed Lagos, Chief stood at his window watching the rain. The thunder echoed his inner turmoil. Lightning flashed, and in that brief illumination, he thought he saw the boy again, standing in the courtyard, drenched but smiling. But when he rushed down to check, no one was there. Only puddles. Only silence. His heart pounded. He knew this was no ordinary child. There was something greater at work, something beyond money, beyond reason. And he knew he could not run from it any longer. The scene ends with Chief standing barefoot in the rain, lifting his face to the storm, whispering to himself, "Something has to change. I must change." The thunder swallowed his words, but in that moment, for the first time in decades, he felt human. The city had not seen such a sunrise in months. Golden light spilled across the skyline, touching the steel towers and broken rooftops alike. The streets, though restless with their usual noise of traders setting up, buses honking, and hawkers chasing coins, carried a strange quietness beneath the chaos, as if the entire world held its breath for what was about to unfold. Inside the mansion of Chief Damien Obiekwe, the billionaire once cold as stone, whose name had long been synonymous with arrogance, silence reigned. The corridors that once echoed with the clinking of wine glasses and the laughter of politicians now trembled under the weight of hushed servants whispering about strange things. Doors creaked where none should have moved. The chandelier flickered though there was no power outage. In the farthest corner of the palatial living room, a single chair rocked slowly, as though someone invisible sat upon it. The staff crossed themselves and muttered prayers when they saw shadows that moved against the light. At the heart of the mansion stood Damien himself, no longer dressed in the silk robes of wealth, but in a simple white caftan, his feet bare, his face etched with sleeplessness. He had not eaten since the incident at the garden with Chibik, the homeless boy who had become his son's unlikely teacher, his mirror, and his wound. The boy's words still rang in his ears. The wealth you cling to is ash. What you fear most will teach you the truth. Damien had thought the boy arrogant, foolish even, but the visions that followed afterward broke him. He had dreamt of fire consuming his towers, his cars melting into black rivers, and his name being spat upon in the marketplace. He had dreamt of his son, his precious only son, Kamsi, standing by the roadside in rags, holding out his hands for scraps of food, while passers-by mocked him. And always, at the center of the vision, was Chibik, silent, watching. Now the boy was gone. No one knew where he had disappeared. Some said he had returned to the streets. Others claimed they saw him walking into the morning fog, whispering to voices no one else could hear. One old gateman swore he had seen the boy step barefoot into the mansion's fountain, and when the water cleared, he was no longer there. Kamsi mourned him. Damien's son wept openly, refusing to eat, refusing to laugh. It was the first time Damien realized his son's joy was not in the gold watches he had bought him, nor in the private tutors or foreign trips, but in that small boy who came from nothing and yet carried light in his voice. For the first time in his life, Chief Damien felt powerless. The turning point came on a stormy evening. The clouds gathered, dark as a funeral cloth, and rain began to beat the mansion's roof. Damien sat alone in his study, staring at the walls covered with certificates, awards, and photographs of himself shaking hands with world leaders. None of it comforted him. In the thunder's roar, he heard the echo of a boy's laughter. "Show me what I must do." Damien cried suddenly, his voice cracking. He was not sure who he was addressing, God, fate, or the spirit of the boy, but the cry tore from him like blood from a wound. "I will give it all away if you just return the child. I will burn my pride. I will bend my neck. Just do not let my son live in darkness." At that very moment, lightning struck the mango tree outside the mansion. The tree split into two, and in the white blaze of light, Damien saw a figure standing barefoot in the rain. It was Chibik. The boy was soaked, but he did not shiver. His eyes burned with a depth far older than his years. He raised a hand, and though the storm raged, the wind seemed to obey him, softening around his frail frame. Damien rushed outside, stumbling barefoot into the mud, his caftan clinging to him like second skin. "Boy," he cried, falling to his knees before Chibik. The billionaire who once would not stoop for any man now bowed like a beggar. "Forgive me. I was blind. Whatever you ask, I will do." The boy smiled gently. "You have already begun, Chief. A proud man kneels not before me, but before the truth inside him." Damien wept openly, his tears mixing with the rain. The following weeks shocked the nation. Headlines filled newspapers and television screens. Billionaire Chief Damien Obequy liquidates properties, builds schools and shelters. People who once cursed his name now watched in disbelief as he sold off his second mansion, closed his private yacht club, and redirected his billions into orphanages, hospitals, and scholarships. But the strangest thing of all was this. The man was no longer seen in expensive agbadas or bulletproof convoys. He was often spotted walking with his son Kamsi and Chibik, the homeless boy, through markets and bus stops. Sometimes he carried bags of food on his own shoulders, distributing them to beggars. Sometimes he knelt on the roadside to wipe the feet of crippled children. Reporters followed him, asking if he had lost his mind. His answer shook them. "I only just found it." Yet not everyone rejoiced. Old business partners mocked him. Politicians whispered that he had gone insane. One evening, while delivering supplies to a slum hospital, a former ally spat in his face and shouted, "Damien, you will die poor, and no one will remember your name." But Damien simply wiped his face and turned away, saying only, "Then let me die remembered by heaven, if not by men." And Chabik? The boy grew strangely quiet as Damien's transformation deepened. He would sometimes vanish for days, reappearing with a faraway look in his eyes. One night, Damien found him sitting under the mango tree, staring at the stars. "Why do you look so sad, my son?" Damien asked. Chabik's voice was soft. "Because my time here is almost done." Damien froze. "What do you mean? You will live with us. This is your home." The boy shook his head. "I was sent to teach, not to stay. The lesson is complete." "No," Damien whispered fiercely, gripping his shoulders. "I cannot lose you. My son needs you. I need you." Chabik placed a hand over his heart. "What you need has already awakened inside you. Look at yourself. You are no longer the man of stone. You are father to the fatherless, a friend to the forgotten. You will carry the light now." Damien wept again, for he knew the boy spoke the truth. The end came quietly. One morning, Kamsi rushed into his father's room, his small face pale. "Papa, Chabik is gone." They searched the mansion, the garden, the streets, but the boy was nowhere to be found. Only the fountain held a clue. Its waters rippled though no wind blew, and at the bottom lay a single wooden carving, the figure of a child holding a lamp. Damien clutched it to his chest and fell to his knees. The newspapers never reported the boy's disappearance. The world assumed Chabik had wandered back into the streets. But those who had eyes to see, those who whispered in prayers at night, knew otherwise. They knew the boy had never been ordinary. He had been sent. Years later, people spoke of Chief Damien as a legend, not for the empires he once built, but for the lives he restored. His son, Kamsi, grew into a man who carried the same compassion. And in every orphanage, every school, every hospital that bore Damien's funding, a small wooden carving stood on the wall, a child holding a lamp. No one knew its origin. No one knew how it appeared. But those who looked at it felt a strange warmth, as if the boy with the lamp was still watching, still teaching, still guiding. And so the story ended not with loss, but with hope. An arrogant billionaire reborn, a homeless boy revealed as a messenger, and a city forever changed by a light that no darkness could quench. And so, this is where our story ends, but not really. Because in every city street, behind every glass tower, and in the eyes of every child society overlooks, there is a hidden story waiting to be told. The billionaire's life was changed forever by a boy the world would have ignored, and maybe, just maybe, there is someone near you right now who carries a light that could also change your destiny. Stories like this remind us that no matter how powerful, wealthy, or cold a person may seem, redemption can arrive in the most unexpected form. Now I want to hear from you. Do you believe that encounters like this, where a stranger can completely transform someone's life, actually happen in real life? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because your story might inspire someone else watching. Don't forget to like this video if it touched your heart, subscribe to Spiritual African Stories, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next suspenseful and uplifting tale we share. Until next time, stay open to the mysteries of life.